Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Thank you for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome back. I like the weekly format, but it's a lot of work. But thanks for staying with me. For those of you that are with me on every episode, and I appreciate you so much. Because this is work, but it's a labor of love. So, well, and a little bit of labor of therapy. So I like doing this stuff. The topics, man, there's no shortage of stuff to talk about in the world. Never mind current events, which I normally don't like to do current events too much, but today I'm not talking about a current event. I tell you what, you guys know probably my wife and I have been together for a really long time. We've known each other for a really long time, since 1987. Well, I've also known my sister-in-law since 1987. And she's a smart lady, and her and my wife are very close, but she's always good for some good content as far as topics go. And so my sister-in-law suggested this topic. And the topic is resentment. And this obviously came up. It comes up in people's lives anyway, but resentment. And there's a lot. That's a big word. That can go with a lot of stuff. Excuse me. And I didn't even remotely touch on the breadth, the scope of the topic. But if you're holding on to some resentment, some deep, decades-old resentment towards someone, it's hurting you. Right? It's not good. It's not healthy, and it's not a positive thing. And over time, like to suppress, well, you might not even be suppressing the bitterness really toward whoever you resent or whatever group you resent or whatever. That will just, it'll eat away at you, and it'll rob you of your joy and your happiness. People, so it, in a psychological sense, it's like unfinished business, right? It's like unresolved angst, some unresolved problem. That's what resentment kind of is. And if it's unresolved, man, your mind, you think about it at the inopportune moments, or maybe all the time. It might be deep and burn you up, and you're consumed with it, maybe. And then it causes you to recall whatever the incident was that caused it to begin with. You're kind of always recalling that. And then the further away we get from that incident, the more the filter of negativity goes on it and less objectivity. And there you go. You got this thing that happened to you, and it's fact, and nobody ever apologized for it or whatever. Yeah. And it becomes like this just chronic state of internal turmoil and angst, rather than the way you just respond to the single event. You know what I mean? And I think by definition, resentment, it does last. It's not a one-time thing. It's not temporary, I think by definition, really. So it takes a toll on you, a measurable toll, really. Physiologically, we know that stress can manifest itself in physical ways. What's some of the ways here? Well, elevated cortisol, that's the stress hormone, I guess it's called. Well, trouble sleeping. You could have insomnia, but the reality is you're just replaying this resentment in your brain. It can cause inflammation in the body. It can cause heart stress on the cardiovascular system. Stress manifests itself physically. We know this. Yeah, we know this. So mentally, what does it do? I mean, it breaks our attention. It demands our attention to where our attentions could be better focused. It amplifies what we already think to be true, our confirmation bias. If you resent a person and this person is unaware, and everything they say to you seems like some sarcastic jab, when this person might be being completely genuine, it amplifies your confirmation bias. What does it do emotionally? Oh, yeah. Now, mental and emotional, you could say are the same, but I always separate those two. I don't know why. Yeah, I separate the two. I don't know if that's normal, if that's what professionals do. I don't know what, but I'm thinking mentally is separate from emotionally. Yeah, it kills your ability to have real lasting joy and happiness. It takes it away. You can't be present in the moment. Imagine somebody in your family you have resentment for, and you're at a family function and they're there and you're there. Well, and your only thing you're thinking about is how much you dislike this person or how they did you wrong. Even though they may be talking to you like, hey, how's it going? It's been a while. And you're like, man, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Your presence. It kills your ability to trust. Yeah. And as far as relationship goes, it creates a bitterness that, yeah, we don't want that. Distance. You're defensive all the time. Now, I'm on this topic because it was suggested. I can recall and see these in life. I know the perfect instances of this in different capacities. Very defensive, and some people get very passive aggressive. I do not like that in people, the passive aggression. I don't like it. Oh. But we see it a lot today because I strongly believe in the modern world here we're ruled more by emotion than logic, you know. Logically, you can reason something out and be like, okay, this is what this person really meant, or this is what they did, but it didn't cause permanent, real damage. It was just, and I can get over it. But these days, everybody's emotional. It's all emotional. Yeah. So, and one of the things is it turns this resentment or this anger into kind of your identity, and you're kind of stuck with it. You take it on as a part of your identity, and you're stuck with it. And therefore, fixing it or resolving it kind of becomes a bigger task because they define themselves by the perceived slight or the perceived injury. And you see this a lot in these activist groups, the victimhood and all this and that. And I don't want to get political here. I'm just saying they've made it a part of their identity. Whatever their oppressed, whatever is, that is now who they are. So to tell them they're not oppressed is to tell them their identity is all wrong. And that just can't have it. Makes it very difficult to resolve the real problem. So yeah, I'm always talking about contradictions and irony. Well, the irony is kind of thick there, is that the person who caused that you resent, that caused this slight, this injury, this whatever, oftentimes they don't even know what they've done wrong, and they move on with life, whereas you are stuck with it and hanging on to it, and it's making you more and more miserable. Long-term misery. So you pay the price day on day, week on week, month on month, and they're out there living life to the fullest. That's the irony of it all. That's what resentment That's why it's no good. So let's talk about some examples. Let's look. Many adults, and even me to a degree, even me, carry a sort of a long standing resentment toward one or both of your parents for whatever failures of the past, right? Whether they were harsh criticism, or they were emotionally unavailable, or they withheld, or they were inconsistent with their affections, whether you just grew up poor and you thought it was some kind of punishment, or then very real stuff like, physical or sexual abuse. That's there too. So as an adult, you replaying these childhood events, and sort of maybe even little traumas, but you're looking at it through the lens, your current lens, your adult lens, and the adult standards, and from standards and norms that your young parents in the 70s and 60s and 70s probably didn't have that insight. So they're getting measured by a different metric. And what you felt as a kid is very different from what you feel now, but it amplifies, as you get older, and you're like, oh man, that was messed up. Our parents were imperfect for sure, and we're imperfect as parents for sure. So I said that I experienced this myself. My mother and I, rest her soul, and we're very much alike, by the way. I wouldn't say she was a good mom. She loved me for sure. But she was wild and a hard woman, and I'd say selfish to a large degree. And she did her own thing, and she loved me dearly, absolutely. But not enough to attempt to present a quote unquote normal life. I kind of resent that her and my dad divorced early. I feel like that I kind of resent that I was unsupervised. I know when you're a kid, you love being unsupervised. But what kids need that they don't know they need at the time is structure. And so I was happy to run wild and do whatever. But in reality, it hurt me. In the long run, it hurt me. I'm resentment. I don't know if you want to say blame or resentment, but I don't know if those are the same. No, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, man, we analyze the way they did things through our current filter of knowledge and resources and culture and all the things. And we don't really consider, the norms of their time, or the constraints that they were under, whether it was financial or whether it was financial or what. For me, a lot of times it was financial constraints, for sure. But, messing with my camera here, I'm sorry. There it is. And also, we don't really look back, and we're talking about resources of the time. Well, our parents, I know my parents, my mom was a smart woman, and I mean sharp. But I don't even think she made it. I don't know that she made it maybe to the 10th grade before she quit school. Yeah, I don't know. And my dad's a great guy. I'm not sure he graduated high school. They weren't educated, is what I'm saying. And they certainly didn't have the internet, and they certainly didn't have the answer to everything at their fingertips. And my daughter and I talk about some of the old ways versus the current ways. Yeah, World Book Encyclopedia was available to everyone, but to go look up an answer to a problem was a task, was a chore. You had to, yeah, you had to get to the library, one, and two, then you had to know exactly the problem you were looking for, and then you had to go look that up in the Dewey Decimal System. Yeah, and the research today that we can sit down and knock out in 1 hour took an entire day at least back then. Yeah, I remember those days. Anyway, resources. Our parents were in a different time. They had different education. I'm not saying different values. We probably carry much of the same values as our parents did. Yeah. We just look at it now as we're adults, and we're not being critical thinkers about it and going, okay, well, they were effed up, and here's why they were effed up, most likely. That reflected on us, maybe unintentionally, probably unintentionally. Yeah. And then never mind the generational sort of family patterns and cycles of maybe abuse or neglect or whatever, right? So we're oftentimes harder on our parents based on what we know now. And so based on what we know now, we look back and think, was that malicious, or just, was it purposeful neglect, or was it just, well, in the case of my parents, dumbass kids. And I'll go to another personal example on that. Speaking of my mom, my mom and her mom, my grandmother, rest her soul, they both died. They lived together in their later, till the end. And, well, after my grandmother probably been married 8 times. She had my mom and my uncle from one husband. She had one of my aunts from another husband. I think her and her sister, when they were young, were honky tonk, good time type. I don't know, man. A lot of stuff going on in the family history. But one thing was clear to me in the later years that I wasn't aware of when I was younger. And I mean, even in my 20s or so, I wasn't really aware, is that my mom held a very deep resentment for my grandmother. And I still to this day don't know why. I can guess, and I can look and guess, but and my mom died alone in the sense that she didn't have a significant other. I mean, she lived with my grandmother, or my grandmother lived with her. Here's the weird, the paradox, is that my mother took care of my grandmother in her elder years, but she did it begrudgingly. She did it as a duty, but it was not done in anger almost, but almost done out of spite. It torments me to this day. How the resentment was so deep. And I once yelled at my mother for yelling at my grandmother. I mean, like, toward the end there. And I kind of feel bad about it in retrospect because my mother died a few months later. But yeah, I had to get in my mom's ass because of the way she was talking to my grandmother. And it was very hateful. And I saw the resentment all in that moment. And I was just blown away. Like, how can you talk to her like this? You're taking care of her. And I think I said something to the effect of, if you're not taking care of her out of love and because you want to take care of her, don't. Move on. Yeah. What would have happened? Well, my grandmother would have been living in my basement. And that would have put a strain on my family. But in that moment, I was blown away at what was happening there. Deep Deep, long held resentment showed itself, and it was ugly. Yeah, it was ugly. Now, my mom came down after that. She was kind of an angry lady too, you know. And for those of you who've known me over the many years, you know that I'm an angry guy, kind of. Not anymore so much, but I've tried to learn how to let go of those types of things, those types of issues, because it's unhealthy. But it exists, man. And if you're an adult holding on to some resentment for one of your parents, you know, I don't know the level. I don't know what your childhood looked like or whatever, but it's probably hurting you. It's hurting them for sure, but it's probably hurting you just as much. Now, oh man, I got a militant gnat flying around here. Now, to say all that, whatever your perceived slight is, it might be legitimate. That's not to invalidate it. Now, if you're out there and like your dad sexually abused you, that's real stuff. That's real. I'm not saying that the resentment is unfounded. I don't, whether it's founded or unfounded. I'm talking about resentment in general. Your slight may be real. I think there's a way to resolve it without holding on to this long-term resentment. But if you were, well, physically abused, that's a give me, right? Yeah, you're gonna. But there's also the sort of mental or psychological abuse, just a parent who's constantly belittling the children or talking to them like they're adults and just talking down to them or gaslighting them or whatever, or emotionally manipulating their kids. You give them all the love when they do a thing you want them to do, but you give them no love when they do something slightly, you know, misbehave a little bit. Or worse yet, not worse yet, but in a different way, neglect, just ignoring your kids. I tell you what, I'm a Gen Xer, and the movie that defined the generation, Breakfast Club, and if you haven't seen it, it's good. It's a teen angst movie. But one of the best lines that's never talked about, that's underrated, is Ali Sheedy's character. I think Emilio Estevez says, well, what do they do to you? They're talking about the parents, right? They're talking about how they all hate their parents. And she said, they ignore me. That's profound. Profound. Right? All the other stuff, right? That was one of the most profound lines in the movie. So even that can create the resentment. And it's real. You have cause. You're validated in thinking that was bad. But the holding on to it is the part. And those real slights, those real, not perceived, those real slights are, yeah, that's basic human responsibility of one human to another. Never mind a dependent child. It's your responsibility as a parent to develop this child, not that they feel the same pain you felt as a youth so that they get tough. It's that they become well developed and emotionally mature and all these things. And loved, and they feel the love. There's never a question whether or not they're loved, even when they've done something wrong. That's your responsibility as a parent, among other things. So yeah, but those things, right? That abuse or neglect or whatnot, that's understandable. That's a defense mechanism that we use. Yeah, it's a defense mechanism. And so even here, even though it's deserved, all modern medicine, psychological stuff, literature and whatnot, talking about trauma recovery and these things, it's all consistent these days. And it consistently says that if we harbor this indefinite resentment and bitterness, that not only is it not going to fix the problem or restore what was lost, it's going to create more damage. And that's it. It keeps our system locked in a constant state of like threat awareness, or like, I guess, sort of fight or flight a little bit. Yeah, and we can't form positive relationships or lasting relationships. And we can't just be at ease. You're never at ease because you're always thinking about being slighted. And why does this person not get what they deserve? So that's sort of, I hit that one, the sort of parental, adult, child, and parent resentment, right? Now, look, I didn't go into this, and I went back and forth. I'll mention it, but I didn't go into it. What about parents that resent their children? They had sex as teenagers and got pregnant, and because they chose not to murder the baby in the womb, they birthed the baby, and instead of giving the baby up for adoption or whatnot, they keep the baby, and then they raise the baby begrudgingly, and then they view this child as having stole their childhood, and they resent this child, and that carries on for years because a child is a burden. It's no other way to put it. A child's a burden. It's resource intensive. A child is. You got to feed the thing. You got to keep it alive. You got to change the diapers. When it cries, you got to feed it. But furthermore, you got to love it, and you got to give it affection. And you can give it surface level affection, but sooner or later, when a child grows a little bit, it starts to seed surface level affection. And what does that do? Well, I'm going to do what gets me that surface level affection, but then when I want the affection. And then everything becomes transactional after that, and it's an emotional manipulation after that. Yeah, parents can resent their children. All right. I didn't mean to get on that, really. I'm just saying it's out there. What's something else that you see a lot? Now, look, I'm an only child. I had a stepbrother for a short period of time, and I'm not sure we had a little rivalry, but I don't think there was any resentment there. But that was only a very short period of time. So everything I'm about to deliver here is my interpretation based on what I see and what I've studied for sure, but I've seen this in action as well. But the sibling dynamics, man, that's a different game right there. That's a different game. Decades later, you may be in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and still you and your sibling, one or multiple, squabble over the same argument that you've been having for 30 years. That's a resentment. And who knows what it comes from? You think, and usually it's something like, well, mom loved you more, or mom did more for you, or whatever like that. And who knows, that may or may not be true. Yeah. Maybe you got more toys, or maybe you got more praise, and then one sibling was judged harsher than the other for whatever reason. Or more importantly, one got more love than the other, more affection. Excuse me. And then as adults, you look at, outward shows of like success or whatnot, money or happiness, perceived happiness, marriage and whatnot. And then that one appears to be doing very well, and then the other gets further assed up because they feel like they're not doing as well. So there's a resentment that why is he doing so well? Is it because he had a better childhood than me? Mom loved him more. crap like that. It's weird. And then but it exacerbates your own sense of failure or whatnot if one is wildly successful and the other isn't. That's a thing, I guess. So all that scorekeeping you did as a kid and all the what turned out is harmless little rivalry now turns into like lifelong scorekeeping and blame gaming. And I see that as silly personally, but again, I didn't have any brothers sisters, so maybe I'm just uninformed. But what I do know though is that this dynamic that I've just described, well, like most things, like most problems in this world, is probably a direct result of poor communication. Yeah. Incomplete information. You think you know what you know, and you only know 30% of the matter. So now I do know from experience that parents are not neutral observers when you have multiple. I got 3 kids. And parents, you almost have to respond. Well, you do. You have to respond to each individual child in their own way because they all have different temperaments and different personalities. And I know there's parents out there that think everything's got to be even Steven. I got to treat them all the same. I got to buy, everyone gets a sucker. Everyone gets a dinosaur. If one gets one, everybody gets one. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I do know that you have to look, that children are individuals, no matter how many you got. And so you have to respond to them accordingly. One may not respond to one form of discipline or whatever the way another does. And so you respond in order to get a desired effect. So it's not blanket. It's not generalized. And so what looked like favoritism to you may have been what's called differential investment. You're just going based on the crisis at hand. I'm solving this problem at hand, and I'm fixing this need in the moment. I can't apply my everybody's even Steven to this event. And so that looks like favoritism if it didn't go down as harshly or whatever as you think. But what, in my opinion, is what some of these siblings don't see, and this was true with my children, is what they don't see is when they're the receiver of the preferential treatment. They see when the other one's getting treated nicely, for whatever reason. But they don't see when they're the one getting the benefit of it. So, and then as we become adults, we remember like, oh, he got treated better. Oh, but you don't remember the times you got treated better. Do you see? And then you hold on to that, and then it fades away. The good, you just remember the bad stuff because we tend to remember bad stuff. I don't know. That's it. So you don't see when you get it, and you do. You have gotten preferential treatment at some point, most likely. And then as adults, you might see your successful sibling as, well, everything's handed to them. It's all easy, but you don't see the burden. You don't see the work, the real work that gets put in, Yeah. Or furthermore, not that you don't see the burden of the successful sibling. You may just have trouble seeing your own value and your own worth. And that's probably from a whole nother psychological problem. So maybe you're kind of projecting a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So lesson there is see your own value, see your own worth, and be successful in your own metric, in your own way. Be successful by your standard, not theirs, because they may be different standards altogether. And as children, right, you may look back and there may have been some genuine unfairness there. Uh, maybe there was. And we all like to externalize our angst and, dissatisfaction a little bit, and it shows in different ways. But if we make who's better, if we're always going back and forth with who's better based on just the individual, they are what they are, and I am what I am. That's because the outcomes of what we grew up to be, by how we were raised, for sure, that's a foundation. And yeah, our siblings probably had a lot to do with our development. Now, I think all three of my kids are pretty close, and I like that. I'm proud of that to a degree. I don't know how much that had to do with me. I know me and Mom tried to keep it all together and tight, but I don't think they nowadays, and they range from 24 to 31, and I don't think that they're very judgmental. They're all very individual. Like, hey, I'm on my path, man. I don't have time to stand in judgment of my brother or my sister. I got work to do. And they're all kind of like that, I think. So if we judge each other, if who's better and who had more preferential team, that's just going to harden us up, man. And I'm all about being hard. You know what I mean? I came up that way, and I'm looking back on it, and it didn't serve me well. Being resilient's one thing, but being hardened in your personality is a different. It has not served me well. It has not served me well. And we don't want that. We don't, because when we're hard like that, our conversations are strained. You know what I mean? Our holiday gatherings are maybe ticking time bombs. Somebody says the wrong thing, you blow up on them. F off. I'm out of here. And then everybody involved, you're whoever the good sibling is and the bad sibling, you both lose the closeness and the possibility of being more like teammates than enemies to get that mutual support as adults that we all need, folks. We all need that mutual support. I wish that I had a brother or a sister to call on. The closest I have is my cousin, and he lives in Oklahoma. Then the next closest I have is my best friend, Timmy. But I've never had a sibling that I could rely on. And that's what you need. We need support as adults. Everything in the modern day, especially with the economy and just the cost of living and everything's it's better attacked as a team. That's why husbands and wives, if they can hold it together and work as a team, you can navigate life a little better, a little easier. And if you got siblings, strong siblings that you can depend on and love and not judge, you can come together as a team and help each other out. Understanding each other's quirks and understanding each other's flaws and knowing each other's foibles. You can work as a team and help each other out. Mutual support as adults. Imagine that. You don't have to go it alone. All right. The next example I'm going to talk about, I have seen this and experienced this. And hell, I still kind of hold on to it. I don't want to say that I harbor deep resentment, but there are a few people in my career that I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire. That's all I can say about it. It shows up at work, doesn't it? Yeah. There are people who harbor deep resentment for either a boss or a coworker or something like that. Especially, okay, let's start with a boss. Why would you resent your boss? They gave you a job. They hired you, man. But then you get there and, because now you're an employee, some bosses are very Well, I'm saying bosses, some people are like that. It's just a personality flaw where and now you work for me, and now they basically think you're their slave. And they think because you work for them, they can disregard any niceties and common respect, manners. I'm always talking about manners. But the boss they just don't recognize your efforts. You think you're doing hard and going above and beyond, and they're just whatever. Or maybe they don't hit the leadership buttons, right? They don't provide clear purpose or clear direction. And every day you're like, well, I guess I'll do this today. Or boss that don't back the team. I see this a lot. I know a lot of police. And, the guys on the streets are guys on the streets. But then the next level of leadership, well, they might back the cops, right? But then the head shed will throw dudes under the bus. And that creates a negative environment. So now you got cops who operate on a cover your own ass basis as opposed to I'm going to do what's right, and I know the head shed's going to back me. So that creates a little resentment. Or what about colleagues? You might. So in the Army, there's and it's probably with the cops too. Well, I'm sure it is. But you got dudes who are overachievers, who are superheroes. They got it all, man. They came up in the perfect environment. They're physically fit. They're good looking, brilliant, problem solvers. Nice even tan. Probably well hung. Got perfect eyes. Perfect hair. Can do no wrong. Charming as hell. Everybody loves them. That might make you feel less than. And therefore you have a little resentment. Like, F this guy. And then, because they're so goddamn charming, the boss loves them. He's the go-to guy. Boss comes in and just pumps him up. And you're over there just working like a Hebrew slave, man. Working. You get nothing. You might resent that guy. But the reality is that guy's probably pulling a heavy load on that team, and he's a value added, right? Probably. Maybe. Unless he starts writing books and whatnot. But then there's the other guy, the underachiever, how did this guy get here? Who thought that this guy deserved to be standing here today? He F's everything he touches, he bumbles it. He's awkward as hell. He can't have a reasonable conversation. Always says the wrong thing. Always misassesses the environment and the situation. Marginal performer. Somebody's always got to pick up his slack. Yeah, you resent that guy. Why do I got to carry this guy's load? It's all there, man. Both ends of the spectrum. It's always there. In almost every workplace, you can find a dynamic that matches that. The causes vary, man. The bosses, your boss might just genuinely be green and not have any leadership skills, and he means no ill will. He just don't know what he's doing. Or he might be good at the job, and because he's been around longest, he's the boss. But he lacks any leadership skills whatsoever. Or he lacks any emotional intelligence. Any of you ever had a young boss, younger than you, like much younger than you? And he lacks any like real maturity and emotional intelligence. And everything he says, it sounds like your teenage son talking back to you. You're like, yeah. And then the underachievers, some coworkers are out there just gaming the system. They're just there for the paycheck. They'll do bare minimum to get the paycheck. Once somebody wants them to work, I'm out. So the reason the reasons vary, but again, the resentment starts with partial information and lack of communication. Your boss might be under pressure from his boss, and you don't see that, but that's what's going on. So, and he's just not dealing with it well. The overachiever might be overachieving because he's trying to make up for some weakness that he's trying to hide, or he knows he has. So he's trying to mask it, but like make up, overcompensate. Maybe. Or maybe he's not well hung. Maybe he has a really small penis, so he's trying to work super hard to be, whatever. Overcompensating. And you don't know what he's hiding, or you don't know what's going on outside of work. You just see what's presented to you right there. It's lack of information. Yeah. And then the underachiever, man, that dude might be struggling. He might have a kid who's terminally ill, and his focus is 100% on that. And he's got to come to work because he's got to have the paycheck. But his mind is always on his kid. So it's a lack of information, usually, and we don't know what the hell's going on. We think we know what's going on because we think we're all brilliant. Yeah. So instead of picking up the bitterness, be curious. Seek clarity. Yeah. Because the bitterness is negative for sure. But if we try to communicate a little better, and look, yes, have boundaries and have set healthy boundaries. You don't have the right to go to a coworker and delve into their personal life, really. But you can be smart about that. But if you don't do clear communication, have good boundaries, or have an exit strategy, because if you're in a situation that's making you bitter, why stay there? Beat it. So have an exit strategy. But if you don't have those things in place and a plan, then you're losing your own individual agency and your ability to respond more healthy as opposed to less healthy. Because what you don't want is for your productivity to drop. You don't want your collaboration with your coworkers to suffer. And you certainly don't want to be the angry guy that people avoid. You don't want to be that guy. Because now they're looking at you. You've got the high achiever, the low achiever. Now there's the angry guy. And nobody wants to deal with you. So across all these examples, there's a few themes there. One, there's either real or perceived injustice, or unfairness, or mistreatment, possibly unmet expectations on your behalf. And then there's a comparison of status, right? He's up here, I'm down here. And then, as always, though, there's the need for human recognition, man. We want to be seen. And then we got our own cognitive factors that, we get in this cycle of rumination, where we always going back to the negative thing, And then that causes us to have an assumption that the person we resent, we think that everything, there's a negative intent. We think that everything they say, no matter how innocuous, no matter how kind, we think there's some secret malicious intent there. It's unhealthy, man. And we have a tendency to freeze a person in their worst moment as opposed to their best. And I'll tell you a thing that you hear in special forces all the time. And it's horrible and it's terrible. But this is the way it is. You're only as good as your last fuck up. Don't matter what you've done before. In SF, you do a fucked up thing and that's it. Boom, that's what they see. And that will last. It don't matter how much of a superhero you are. It don't matter what you do after that. You're only as good as your last fuck up. That's a very negative thing. And it's too bad about that. And potentially that culture may be changing. I don't know. But all these things compound, folks. And the resentment, I've said the word curiosity a few times. The resentment crowds out that curiosity. You're no longer willing to be curious about a person's state of existence. You're not willing to ask. You're not willing to to bring down your barrier a little bit to ask the question. And it crowds out our ability to have some gratitude for to have some gratitude. Just gratitude, just being thankful to be alive. Never mind the way somebody treats you or whatever. And guess what else that does, folks? Never mind emotionally and all that. On a professional level, that resentment hinders your creative problem solving because it's a filter in there, and it's a filter that doesn't need to be in there to help you solve a problem most efficiently. The resentment also fuels anxiety, possibly even depression. And you're living with this, pervasive sense of like you're powerless to affect change on anything. And externally, it damages relationships. That's it. Relationships that might otherwise be repaired and be renewed and become supportive. But you can't get past that resentment. And then over the years, folks, it will shrink your world to where you have less or fewer authentic human connections. You're willing to take fewer risks on people or on jobs or anything. And you spend all that energy replaying these old slights in your head. And what's the ultimate cost here, folks? The ultimate cost of this resentment is your freedom. Yep. It takes away your freedom to respond to life as it is. And the resentment forces you to respond to life as it was. It's not healthy. All right. So as always, good people, you know that all the things I talk about, I try to provide some thoughts on practical application. What good is all this if I don't give you some way forward, right? Well, obviously it starts with working on yourself. Emotional maturity is, the capacity to see other people, to see our reactions from a distance, right? And not being owned by that reaction. Not being so wrapped up in the moment that we can't step back and see how our reaction is affecting others, and that reaction may or may not be warranted. So we got to have that maturity to be able to see, like, is this the appropriate reaction to this thing? We got to take an inventory of ourselves and of those reactions, right? And those whatever perceived causes. What part of this is pain from the original injury, old stuff, and what part of this is my own unmet needs that are being projected outward? And this examination of ourselves, right? That don't mean we have to blame ourselves. That's not what self-examination is. It's just taking ownership of your own mental and emotional state of mind. We don't have to blame ourselves if we're not to blame. If we are to blame, then we have to be able to do that. If we're able to release this resentment, folks, that we hold for our mom or our brother or sister or our coworker or our boss, and find a little bit of internal peace, right, for ourselves, That frees up space on our hard drive for other things. we increase our capacity when we delete junk files. And when you no longer need that resentment to explain your pain or to protect your personal identity as a victim, then we're able to free up space, folks. We're freeing up space in our hard drive. And I'm going to say a word here. Be with me. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a capitulation to your perceived wrongdoer. And it's not a free pass for your perceived wrongdoer. And it doesn't require, forgiveness does not require full-on reconciliation. It doesn't even require an apology. Forgiveness ultimately is your decision to stop carrying around that emotional baggage that's weighing you down, that emotional weight. That's what forgiveness is. It's a very unique act of self-liberation, folks. And that forgiveness is you refusing to let another person's past actions live rent-free in your mind. Free up that space, folks. Free up that hard drive. Get rid of the junk files. I recognize that it's a process, good people. Nothing's instant. Nothing is instant. There is no easy fix for any of this. And when you get into these deep emotional issues, the deeper, the more complex. And you going through this process may involve you grieving over what you think you lost. And it probably requires a very clear-eyed acknowledgement of the harm that was done, for sure. But you can acknowledge the harm and then move on. Some people have never acknowledged the harm. Now, I can tell you, I'm not going to tell you this story, but there is a family member in my life that I have deep resentment for and did harm me, and I've never really acknowledged that harm because it was physical for sure, but it was less physical than it was emotional or mental. It was mental. Yeah. It's a process. Acknowledge things. And then we can start to, we need to be deliberate about regulating our emotions. And if you move through this process and you're consistent about it and you stick with it, people who have done this, and I mean clinically, people who have done this, they report back with, having better clarity, lighter relationships, and like new improved capacity to be proactive based on their own choices rather than reacting to old patterns and solving a problem from an old filter. And what they've done and what we should all do is we have to own our own response, the way we respond to these slights. And we have to actively and proactively seek out, some level of understanding if it's available. And then set our boundaries where we need to set them and stick to them. And then ultimately, kind of release the negative judgment that we use, that filter that we use, that we judge through the filter of that negativity. We got to get rid of that. And then more importantly, good people, we want the kind of freedom that requires zero external validation from anyone. We need to get out of that seeking external validation. And in that freedom, then we have the possibility to live full lives and be present in the moment rather than living in a permanent state of resentment and living endless cycle just constantly bringing up the miserable past. Yeah. Those are my thoughts on it, folks. I thought it was a good topic, and I'm glad my sister-in-law suggested it. Give me your feedback. You dealing with any of that kind of stuff with your family? Now here, look, good people. What was notable that I didn't talk about? I talked about adult children and parental resentment. And I talked about adult sibling resentment. And I talked about workplace resentment. What's the notable big one that I didn't talk about? Yeah. Husband and wife spousal resentment. Now I'm just teasing it here. I didn't talk about it because there's so much. I didn't want to do a friggin' 3-hour episode. But yeah, that's there, good people. The spousal resentment. And I'm gonna visit that. I'm gonna do a little research. Obviously, I've been married for a really long time. I've got some personal insights to share. And we all probably have some good insights to share on that. Every one of you, if you're married and have been, or if you have good mates that are married, or whatnot. We've all seen it, or even with our parents. Yeah, we can even see it through our parents. The spousal resentment, folks. So yeah, put a pin in that one. It's a big one. Okay. Good people. Again, appreciate you all for being loyal listeners. What we have coming up for shooting. We have on August the 8th a pistol workshop. We're going to be working on priority of efforts, efficient movement, vision at speed, efficient target transitions. It's going to be a good time. On 22 August, we have the wild card day. That's a random drills shot out of the drill index card deck. We analyze them for their validity and the methodology, and are they good for training or not. And then you may have an opportunity to shoot for the Blackjack 33 coin. But there's a shoot-in for that. All right. Then on 12 September, we have armed self-defense, force on force. That one, again, I always describe it as being an eye-opener. It's scenario-based, and it's yes, you're going to be armed, and yes, you're going to be held to a marksmanship standard. However, this is decision-making under stress, folks. This is, do you think, can you successfully negotiate an armed robbery in a parking lot, for instance? It's such a good course. I love doing it. October 3rd. What happens on October 3rd, folks? Every year. Well, around the weekend of October 3rd every year, we have the OSS Challenge Mogadishu Mile. That is that's a 2-gun, and it's very physical. Think maybe similar to like the tactical games or something like that. You'll be doing some physical stuff. Maybe doing a rope bridge across a pond, climbing ropes, dragging a rescue Randy, etc. That kind of thing. And that's done to commemorate, obviously, the Battle of Mogadishu, Operation Gothic Serpent. And we do that to promote Three Rangers Foundation. On 10 October, we have the No Che match. That's a pistol match. And that's clearly to commemorate the fall of a murdering communist. On 24 October, we have a dynamic everyday carry course. What makes it dynamic is that, we're going to be in the classroom for a little bit, but we're going to integrate a lot of movement with our concealed carry techniques and stuff. That's a good one. 31 October, good people, we have the Battle of Rome. The idea for that was conceived by my friend Cooper and Brooke, and that we were originally going to do that just for Rome Strength and Fitness members, but we're opening that up to everybody, and that's a pistol-only match, but it's also similar to the Moog Mile. There's physical events going on. It's going to be CrossFit oriented, physical events. It's going to be a good time. I think we're going to do 4 stages on that. And so it's going to be fitness and pistol shooting, and it's going to be fun. And we're going to try to make it unique and whatnot. So get out there. It's up on the website. And then, as always, we have private sessions available, folks, as always. So that's what's going on in the shooting world. In the consulting world, folks, on ospreyshootingsolutions.com/consulting, I have uploaded a couple of free downloads for you to use. They're very well, they're critical, really. And if you haven't put a lot of thought into your church security, well, I have a free church security checklist that you can download, and it's pretty goddamn thorough. And then if you're a missionary type or an overseas traveler where you go to, semi-permissive environments, third world countries that are potentially dangerous, I have a travel/work abroad checklist and some guidance in there. And it's very thorough. And that guidance is all pulled out of my SAFE Module 1 that I've been working on, the security awareness in foreign environments. And folks, I keep saying I've been working hard on it. I can't tell you the value there. It's critical stuff. It's critical stuff. And the problem is you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't have. So it's here for you to look at and to think about. And then also I have the SAFE flyer download there for those of you who want to look at it. Again, it's targeting missionaries. It's targeting humanitarian nonprofits, targeting international salespeople, international journalists, independent journalists who travel abroad alone and unafraid. This training is geared toward all those people. So look at the SAFE, security awareness in foreign environments. All right. And then don't forget about 2 Team Guys, good people. Don't forget about 2 Team Guys. They're on demand, right? On demand. We have land navigation. We have a workshop. We have a 2-day land nav, and then we have a 3-day land nav that's an overnighter. We have a search and rescue mountaineer course that very possibly is going to be coming up in late fall of this year in conjunction with Nathan over at Higher Ground. We have a situational awareness course that can be done standalone. That's also a part of the SAFE program. We have a long range evasion course that can also be done standalone, but is also integrated into the SAFE program. We have small unit missions, and those, that's operator type stuff. It's not a training course so much as it's a big scenario, good time. You're going to learn a lot of things. There's so much leadership and team development in there, but it's fun. You get to be an operator for a couple of days. And then we have the Surviving Captivity course, folks. That course, again, standalone, but it is the SAFE Module 2 is purely based off surviving captivity. And it has been broken down into smaller chunks as a curriculum. So it can be done standalone also. So all those things are out there at 2 Team Guys. You need 4 or more people to do these things. And if you have 4 or more people and you're interested in one of these courses, we'll put it together and get it on the calendar. All right. And then there's the juntopodcast.com. You're listening to me right now. So thank you so much. Wherever you listen, thank you so much. But there's a website also. All right. Good people. I can't express my appreciation to you enough. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Take care and be safe.